Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lantern's Quest. My name is Timothy Barrett and I'm joined by Pastor David Barrett and Pastor Lucas Baumbach. And this is episode 48 maybe of our Exploring a Sketchbook of Christ. And so we're glad that you are viewing the video. And I'll just say it up front, good time to like the video because then you don't have to remember to do it later. Maybe subscribe. Click the bell for notification, do that. And that would be great to do that right away. So in the intro there, you see the slides for our sponsors, Wellsprings Church, where David is the pastor or teaching elder there, Reformation Bible Presbyterian Church, where Lucas is the pastor there. Also Bradford Christian College, and then Covenant Academy Online. And you'll find information as far as links or email addresses for each of those sponsors in the description below. So let's just begin, Pastor Lucas. Let's begin with you. Any updates you want to bring tonight?
Yeah, not any big updates on my life. Just happy to be here going through Mark. We're in Mark 12. Wait, we're in Mark 12? Yeah, we're in Mark 12. So we're almost, I don't know, are we 3/4 of the way through? I guess we are.
Sure.
Soon to be, as soon as we finish the chapter.
All right. And Pastor David, any updates from you?
Sure. We finished our family VBS, and I do believe that they were those teachings, which included Pastor Lucas, were recorded on YouTube. So you can go to the Wellsprings Church YouTube channel and look at those if you had wanted to attend or have an interest in the Christian history of America and its impact of Protestant and particularly Presbyterianism, and also biblical truths seen in the Declaration of Independence. And so now we've gotten through that mode. We're kind of in the rest of our summer mode. We're teaching through the third book of Psalms. And as soon as we finish Psalm 89, which completes book 3 of the Psalms, we'll jump into the New Testament and do the Gospel of Luke. That's kind of where our Wellsprings Church preaching schedule is. And Bradford Christian College, I'm working with the current students on what their fall schedule will look like. And I would encourage anybody having an interest in Christian college, particularly a solid Reformed Protestant Christian college that's rooted in biblical truth and is set up in this unique distance learning mentor directed format, to get a hold of us, whether it be for this fall. Still time to get yourself going for the fall that will start early September, or for even down the road, next spring semester or even next year. We'd love to talk to you and get things coordinated. I was meeting with a family that I had thought had an interest in Bradford Christian College, and rightly so. She graduates this next spring, and she says, I'm going to be your student next fall. So I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, that's what's going on over here.
All right. And again, links are in the description below for Reformation Bible Presbyterian Church, for Wellsprings Church, also for BradfordChristianCollege.com. There's an email address for Covenant Academy Online if you have an interest in getting help with homeschooling in particular, live online classes that can be provided for anywhere from grades 4 through 12. So please do check out that information and contact us with questions, and we'll be glad to talk with you about those opportunities. Okay, as we confirmed here at the start, we are in Mark chapter 12, and I need to do some technical mumbo jumbo here to get, still learning how this all works. Well, there we go. All right, so we're in Mark chapter 12. We're actually here at verse 13. We read these verses last time and talked a little bit about this situation. Now, if I remember correctly, we are on Tuesday of the last week leading up to the crucifixion. And
I think that's what you said last time. So,
Yep,
well,
that is correct.
at least I'm consistent. So,
Yep.
If you're going to be wrong, you should be consistently wrong. I was always bothered by students that would misspell a word and they would misspell it differently every time. It's like, just pick a spelling and go with it. Anyway, Tuesday, according to the bird's eye view, it would be April 4. So, okay, so we are in the temple. So I'm going to read these verses here, 13 through 17. We read them in the last episode. And by the way, for those of you viewing, if this is the first video you've come on board with, and you're wondering what's going on here, go to the Bradford Christian College YouTube channel, click on playlists, find Exploring a Sketchbook of Christ playlist. You'll find all the videos there, and you can work through those and get caught up if you need to, or if you just are wanting to get caught up for what we're talking about right now, you can watch the previous episode and then come back to this episode and you'll be in good shape. Okay, so let's start here at verse 13. They sent to him certain of the Pharisees and of the Herodians to catch him in his words. And when they'd come, they say to him, Master, we know that you are true and care for no man, for you regard not the person of men, but teach the way of God in truth. Is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not? Shall we give or shall we not give? But he, that is Jesus, knowing their hypocrisy, said to them, Why tempt you me? Bring me a penny that I may see it. And they brought it. And he said to them, Whose is this image and superscription? And they said to him, Caesar's. And Jesus answering said to them, Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they wondered at him. All right, so that verse 17 is maybe a verse that many people would be familiar with. It's kind of a saying that is probably gained some traction in popular culture, perhaps. At least the first part of it, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. But we've in the last episode we talked about these Pharisees and Herodians and such. So I don't know that we need to revisit that. But Lucas, we're told something about them in that verse 13, that they have a particular intent as they come to confront, I'll say, Jesus, to question Jesus. And so to catch him in his words, that phrase does inform us about what we read in verse 14. Would you agree? And do you want to pick up from there? And
yeah, well, that particular word means to trap, to trap, to catch, to trip up. So it's interesting. One of the commentaries that I like says, yeah, this is Mark's famously vague way of putting things. They sent some Pharisees, some Herodians, which are completely different groups. These would be probably enemies, if they in any other, situation. So they come to test him in different ways, and in this particular way, they're going to trip him up in his words. Fascinating that they decide to use money. What translation were you using? I find that
I'm reading from the
objectionable.
Webster Bible.
Oh, okay. Well, the term penny, my goodness, a denarius is like a day's wage. That's the word. So it would be like today it'd be like 100, or depending on the kind of job you have, maybe even $200. Not a penny. So if you work at McDonald's, maybe it's $50, but probably not nowadays since everything's $20 an hour. But denarius. So he overturns the money changers' tables. He comes in and asserts his authority, objects, and then to show how crazy they are. Maybe they thought through it well, but it seems kind of crazy. Like, we're obsessed about money, We're obsessed about turning the temple into a money-making scheme. And then we're going to come and we're going to question you about money. If you're looking at them as just foolish, I mean, this is just a revelation of like what the kind of stuff that they're really interested in. Of course, there's a political implication to the money question, because we're going to see that in a second. But trying to trip them up about money. Maybe they know that this is going to basically make him mad because it's another situation where they're talking about money, and that in a sense, if this guy is a competitor king to Caesar or whatever, there's going to be some animosity that Jesus is going to have to deny Caesar, which is interesting because that's actually what has to happen in the early church. The early church has to deny the deity of Caesar. So there's something important here. Also, in the religion of the Romans, it's okay for Caesar's image to be on a coin, but the Jews are a little bit more careful about putting images on things, and I think they all know that all the Jews know that Caesar basically is like a demigod, or a god on the way to becoming realized. So there could be that implication, like if you have money in your pocket, you're carrying around little idols. And one more bit about this, this little trick, this little catch. They actually catch themselves, which when Jesus turns it around on them, we're going to see that. But they have the way he turns it around. Do we want to go there yet? The way he turns it around, it's that same Socratic method where he doesn't answer their question. He asks a question in turn. And the question he asks is, well, what's in your pocket? I don't have any money. I don't have any of this money. Jesus doesn't have any of the money. He has to ask them to supply the example, the money. So,
Okay.
there you go.
So, David, I think last episode you talked some about the questions, or not really the questions, but the statements that the Pharisees and Herodians were saying to Jesus that seemed to be like going over the top, maybe in a way to try to cover what their real intention is, right? In catching these words. And so I don't know that we necessarily need to revisit that. I think moving forward in these verses, and Lucas alluded to this somewhat, I'm wondering if there would be any kind of an issue, right? Because we're in the temple, and Lucas had mentioned that, for Jews, you don't have images. You're not to make images of, I think he said demigod, but, isn't there an issue for them to have money in the temple that has the image of someone on it? You might talk a little bit about that, but go ahead and go to, into verse 16 with what you want to say here.
Okay. Well, I'll just do a little intro on the wording that you talked about in verse 14, how they basically flatter Jesus. I referenced Luke chapter 20 last time, and I'll just read verse 20 again, because I think these people are the spies that Luke references. Because after they left Jesus, being the chief priests, scribes, and elders were the ones that had confronted Jesus at first, and he gave the parable of the vineyard, and they knew it was about them, and they were like going to kill him, but were afraid of the people. They left, and it says in Luke 20:20, so they watched him and sent spies, and then these are the words, who pretended to be righteous. There's their pretending to be righteous right there. That they might seize on his words in order to deliver him to the power and the authority of the governor. So they do. They are going to try to entrap him in his words, so that they could turn him over to the governing authority, be that Herod himself or to Pilate. And again, Pharisees and Herodians don't normally associate except for when they have a common enemy. That enemy is Jesus. And yeah, it is something that they would have such a coin. Maybe it was one of the Herodians that had the coin. I mean, they are there as well, and so they would not be near as have near as the scruples about carrying that kind of coinage. But I do believe in the tables that Jesus was overturning, they were money changers as well. And if people were going to give payment for their animal sacrifice or offerings in coin, they had to change the money, because if they had this type of Caesar money, they would need to get an exchange and get acceptable coinage. And I think it was one of the way the Sadducees in particular, but probably Pharisees and anybody connected with the temple, was making a profit using Caesar's money. So there's a hypocrisy here, and I think he exposes that by asking for this coin. And he, as Lucas points out, he puts a question to them first. Okay. But before I say that, the question that they put to Jesus is kind of like, the horns of a dilemma. If he says, don't pay Caesar, then obviously he's rebelling against the government. The Herodians will go right to Herod, say, he's advocating this. Herod was dependent upon Rome for his rule, and that would put him at that. If he says, pay Caesar, then he could lose the populace. Okay. And so what I think they have designed to do is try to put back on Jesus the horns of the dilemma type of situation that Jesus had put on them when he said, is John the Baptist, was his ministry, his baptism from heaven or from men? And they couldn't speak. Okay. And so Jesus wouldn't answer. So they've kind of set him up. They're trying to use the same tactic on Jesus. And he begins by asking for the coin, which, it's a denarius, 1 day's wages. But in argument to Webster's favor, if you look at it, it ties into the Latin. It means a penny and so forth. So anyway, it can be that way. But R.C. Sproul, in his commentary on Mark, he comments about this image and superscription that is on the coin. And he points out that at that time in Jewish history, the Caesar whose image appeared on the denarius is Tiberius, who reigned after Augustus from AD 14 to 37. So he's currently the Caesar, and he'll be the Caesar even at the crucifixion, obviously. His image was pressed on the surface of the coin along with an inscription, and he has a Latin inscription, which means Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus. And then on the other side of the coin was the inscription Pontiff Maxim, and that means high priest. So the emperor was not only the supreme political ruler of the Roman Empire, he was the supreme religious leader, seen as a deity. The name Augustus was actually a title given to Tiberius's father that means the august one, and that had been conferred on him by the Senate. And that was a religious honor, indicating that he possessed transcendent majesty. And it was a term the Jews would only use for God. They believed that calling any creature august was an act of idolatry. So the denarius displayed the full depth of the arrogance of the Roman ruler and empire. So I think for the Pharisees, they, being the conservative branch of the corrupt religious leaders, I'm sure they had a hard time with this coin. So it's probably a Herodian that brought it forth. But because he says, knowing their hypocrisy, I think the coin, somehow exposed the hypocrisy of both of them, because they probably accepted those coins in their money exchanging as well, which happened in the temple court. So
Okay,
all that is going on.
All right, so let's real quickly, because you've mentioned now two Caesars, so maybe we can fill in that history. The Caesar Augustus, is he the Caesar when Christ is born?
Yes, he is. He renders the decree that caused Joseph and Mary to go to Bethlehem for the census.
And then at some point in Jesus' lifetime, that Caesar dies. He was.
Yeah.
Do we know how? Was he murdered by his son and taken? I don't know. Seems like that happens. So,
I don't think Caesar Augustus was murdered.
Okay.
I don't remember that. He wasn't like Julius Caesar to Brute.
Okay.
That type of thing where somebody or the Senate. But I don't know the history quickly enough.
Right. But regardless of that, at some point in Jesus' lifetime, he dies and his son.
Well, it says Sproul indicates AD 14. So that would have been possibly when Jesus was in his teens, maybe late teens, that rulership changed.
Okay. All right. So that helps a lot in following the flow of the story. So Lucas, maybe you want to take us into verse 17, because I think it's important for us to really contemplate, to think about this verse in particular, because I know that in my experience, I've had a number of circumstances where this verse is just quoted all by itself and is used to like settle the argument that you have to obey government, right? And
Right. Sure.
Is that what it's really saying to us? And let's do some exploration of that idea, Lucas.
Yeah. Well, it says ta kaisaros apodote. So the things, ta is plural. So those things, anything, it doesn't say anything, but it does say those things. That's that sense of anything. Of Caesar, so kaisaros would be in the genitive, the possessive. So anything that are of Caesar. So Caesar's image-bearing coins, right? These are of Caesar. He's the one who minted them. Apodote, it's that apo in the beginning gives the do dare, the giving word. We say probably to give back, right? So you give back to him. Whatever came from him, give it back to him. And that sets up the parallel command here, that there's going to be other things. Ta also, there's these other things, this different category of things that are of God, that are God's. And it doesn't actually say give back, it's just understood to God, right? But that giving back to God, the things that are God's. This is a principle in giving an offering, giving of the firstborn. If you're in a family, there's this principle of not just giving first fruits, which we talk about sometimes in tithing. Do you give 10%? A lot of folks like to point out that there's a first fruit principle, not a 10% principle, which is following probably more of a spirit than the letter. The letter would be, I'm only going to give 10%. And the spirit is, well, you give first fruits, like you give maybe your firstborn child, or you pay a special homage to God for giving you that firstborn child. That's what Hannah did. She did that with Samuel. She prayed for a child, and God gave her a child, and she said, I'm going to give my child back to God. So that's that sense. If you think about, go back and read that story in 1 Samuel, that story of Hannah crying out to God, please give me a son. And then she gives him right back to God. It's absolutely remarkable. It's really, it can almost drive you to tears just to think about it. But how different is this principle here that Jesus gives? This is well within the capacity of the Jews to understand this principle of how you give offerings. You come here to the temple, I'm going to instruct you properly. Now, a lesser teacher, a lesser master would stumble at this point, say, well, it just depends. Like there's nuance, and in this case, we can have the image of Caesar, but in that case, we don't want it. So that's why we have to do money changing or whatever, sort of like rationalistic exercises like that sometimes you see pastors come up with when they're in the pulpit trying to rationalize scripture and messing everything all up. And that's when we pastors do that, we confess and ask God for forgiveness, because we're to rightly divide the truth. Well, Jesus doesn't have that problem. Jesus rightly divides, from the word go. And in this particular case, it's a satisfying answer that doesn't compromise at all. That you give back a piece of coin that Jesus doesn't even have. Like in all of his ministry, of all these people that are following him, they probably want to give him like alms or whatever. He doesn't even have any money to give an example with. And so that's because he's of God and God owns all things. There's an interesting story in Acts where Peter goes to the disciple talking about a similar issue. Do you pay the temple tax? This isn't the Roman taxes. This is the temple taxes. And Peter goes and pulls a coin out of a fish's mouth, showing you that like God can, divinely appoint the means of our provision. So yeah, this is I just think a very straightforward, but look at their response. A straightforward teaching, a teaching that should have been grounded in scripture that everybody should have understood, but they looked at him like, we've never heard any such thing. And it's sad. It really is sad to think that their political philosophy, the Herodians' political philosophy, that the Pharisees, their spiritual philosophies, their theology was so bad that they were blown away. They were absolutely blown away. They couldn't even divine such an answer themselves. They really thought they had him in a bad situation. And yeah, so I'm sure there's lots more that can be said about that. And I don't know if I really fully answered the, obey the governing authorities question. Certainly that's true. Romans 13 kind of backs that attitude up a little bit. But there are also situations where you don't obey the authorities. Like what Peter says to the Pharisees in Acts, he says, we must also obey you or God. Like what authorities we do have, like a hierarchy of authority. I'm going to obey God, and then I'm going to obey, religious leaders second, civil authorities, my parents, or maybe you should put your parents right below God. So anyways.
Right. Yeah. So David, I like where Lucas went with this, with the point that the Pharisees in particular, kind of marveling at Jesus' answer, like, whoa, where did that come from? And to put that together with your imagery of they're presenting like the horns of a dilemma to him, and they're thinking we can impale him on these horns of this dilemma, and Jesus deftly dodges that, right? And gives this response.
He comes up with a third option that they had not had in mind, and Lucas is correct, they should have. Or in logic terms, it's called he split the horns of the dilemma here. And he gives a principle. He gives a principle answer. Now, he doesn't go beyond that to application, and that's where we need to take in the greater part of the Word of God. But certainly in their situation, they're conquered people. The money producer is Caesar. He's put his image on it. He says, this belongs to me. And Jesus answers, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. We got to make sure we read that correctly, because a lot of people, especially as you were saying, Tim, they use this to say, well, if there's a question about how we should behave according to a particular government mandate, like vaccination, mass immunization, teaching your children or whatever, they will go to this, but they go to this and they read those words incorrectly. Jesus said, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. He did not say, render to Caesar the things that Caesar says are his. And that's the way too many people read this. And governments tend to try to lay claim to things that are not theirs. I mean, we faced this back in the, 60s, 70s, and 80s of the previous millennium, and even into the 90s a little bit in Idaho, where they were laying claim to your child and his education, right? In fact, I remember testifying before a committee at the Capitol building it was on daycare licensure. And literally one of the representatives says, we need to do what is best for our children. And their terminology was an ownership of the children. And it becomes a thing. So Jesus said, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar. And so what has to be determined is what is Caesar's. Okay. Now, Jesus determined that coin was Caesar's and it should be rendered to him. And then he says, and to God, the things that are God's. And that begs the question, what is not God's? Is there anything that does not belong to God? Well, nothing in this world does not belong to God. Like Abraham Kuyper says that there's not a square inch in the whole domain of human existence over which Christ, who is Lord over all, does not exclaim, mine. Okay? That's kind of the summary statement of Scripture. God owns you. He owns your family. He owns the church. He owns the state. Okay? Ultimately, Caesar needs to get rendered to God. And then those things that are truly to be Caesar's will line up correctly. Romans 13 is an excellent scripture to look to because it teaches the fundamental biblical view of proper civil government from God's purpose. So just some cautionary things, certainly Peter gives us a guiding principle by his example. We ought to obey God rather than men. But too often people kind of truncate that too, because the situation was preaching Jesus, that if they ever tell you can't preach the gospel, you preach it. But God has a lot of other mandates concerning how we ought to be and behave. Again, education became a primary one when the homeschool movement was going. And all of a sudden, people who probably didn't think outside of, well, if I am ever told I can't show the gospel, that's when I'll not obey civil government, actually violated compulsory attendance laws and chose to educate their children because they believed their children belonged to God, and they do, and their responsibility of training that child up in the way he should go was given to them by God, and they were accountable to him, and they reasoned that way. And it was not, well, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, and Caesar says the children are his, so we render them. No, that's not what Jesus said. He gave a very principled statement, and we got to properly reason it out.
Right. So it's fast becoming longer and longer ago, but not so long ago, right? We had a circumstance in this country where the government was issuing, let's say, mandates or directives regarding church services and size of meetings and such. And I was working as an administrator of a church at the time. And the board of the church was suggesting that we put up signage at the entrances that strongly suggested to those who came into the building that they wear masks. And so I pointed out that it was interesting to me that this was the first time in my affiliation with this church that I saw such concern over the particular behaviors of people who attend the church. Like, I'd never seen a sign up that, those of you that attend here, we strongly urge you to put away stealing, or we strongly urge you to not be those who are committing adultery, right? Those kind of behaviors, they didn't seem to think they needed to put up signs to encourage people not to engage in those behaviors. But in this moment, they decided they needed to have a sign that would encourage people to engage in a particular behavior. And I don't know how well received my comment was, but I just found it, like, if we decide that as a church board we need to instruct and encourage people in particular behaviors, let's do it. Let's, but anyway, there's a more recent story that I came across. This story was posted July 13 of this year. And it's a family that I guess is originally from Romania, but they were living in Sweden.
Yeah.
And they had their girls taken from them. Are you familiar with this story?
I heard a little bit
Yeah.
about it recently.
Yeah. So they had their children taken from them. But what ended up happening was that the oldest daughter was upset about some particular rules that the parents were enforcing. And so she told a lie that she had been abused. Well, once the children were taken, both the older daughter and the younger daughter said that it's not true, and there was no evidence of any abuse. So you think that that would be the end of it, but the Swedish social services kept the girls, and when they were pressed for why are you doing this, their response was, well, they're required to attend church 3 times a week. They're not allowed to use nail polish or paint their nails. There's no television in the home. The parents read Bible stories to them. And, those Bible stories, some of them are violent. And so the charge was religious extremism. And so I don't know how long, it's been quite some time that these children have been kept from their parents. And there's been some protesting about this and trying to get movement from Sweden, but I guess they have not yet been successful. But that's that was going kind of to what you were saying, David, that just because Caesar can make an assertion that something belongs to him doesn't mean that that's the case. And I don't think that we want to try to interpret these verses in a way that justifies us just being rebellious. I think as Christians, we should want to obey the laws of our land. And, thankfully, we live in a country where by far most of the laws are pretty agreeable to Christianity, right? I mean, it works out pretty nicely. But we also have to be mindful of these kind of important, lines that need to be upheld. I mean, John MacArthur, I would say, was one who came to some maybe better realization, you might say, in that regard.
Yeah.
What he went through with that particular year that will not be named, in case YouTube's not happy about it. I don't know, but that's.
I think there was a documentary out on how they went through that process. I remember watching it. It came out in the theaters even. And
are you talking about MacArthur's church?
Yeah, MacArthur's church, and they actually either showed or reenacted like board meetings and stuff. And I think it'd be a good thing. I don't know where that is now, but it'd be a good thing for people to watch or study what their process was, because they did, and there were some elders that just had a hard time making that decision of we're going to open the doors for those that want to come and worship, And I think there was one elder that actually couldn't in his conscience make that choice, but chose to actually just step away as an elder. And of those that remained, it was kind of like our Declaration of Independence. Those that did vote, it was unanimous. But yeah, and I understand the struggle, but I think we somehow put civil government on a different pedestal and a higher one than even like pastors of a church. We will counter and speak contrary to something that a church leader is doing freely, much more freely than if we were to counter or speak contrary to a vote, an action, a law that civil government passes. And I don't know that we should have that type of a thing. It's kind of like, well, if our church leadership makes a certain decision, I'm gonna balk at that, and try to do something about it. But if our civil government makes a certain decision, it's, well, render to Caesar what's Caesar's, and it's the whole idea of misreading this.
Yeah, I think as Christians, one of the things that we need to be evaluating of ourselves is, who am I fearing more, right?
Yeah.
Am I actually living in more fear of what the civil government might do to me, or do I truly fear God? And is he the one that I fear? And I don't know that it's always easy to figure that out. At what point do I'll use the word resist, but I do not mean necessarily being violent or anything that way.
No, we have the right to peaceably assemble and have a redress of grievances.
Yeah.
And
we should resist at every point. I don't think that we should not resist. And we say, oh, we have a country that's more peaceable than maybe some other countries. Well, I mean, there's countries where Christians are being killed, so that's not happening here yet. But it's not good for Christians here. And let's just use our local example. Nampa, at the Gay Pride Festival this year, all like 40 evangelists who were trying to greet people as they came and went from this Pride Festival, they called it, were basically trespassed by the police officers. And I don't know who was briefing these police officers here in Nampa, Idaho. I'm very actually angry about it. They have a right to be there. They weren't harming anybody or obstructing the entrance or anything like that. They were just nearby, as people are coming and going, on the sidewalks and stuff. And the police really overplayed their hand. And we were actually told by the mayor earlier this year to have our churches park in all the parking spots around around the event, because none of those parking spots are being rented by the event. So we could actually take up all the parking with like church members parking there. And so he's encouraging us to resist. We should resist. COVID and 2020, the year you didn't want to mention. There goes your.
Well, thanks for doing that.
There goes the algorithm. No, nobody's going to see this video, but you're going to be suppressed. But anyways, during that period, we were told, oh, for 2 weeks we're going to quarantine. Well, that's what quarantines do for a limited period of time. Like Ellis Island, you'd bring people into America, and we've epidemiology is like very sort of cut and dried in the bag, right? We've already covered all these things for like centuries. We've figured this stuff out, and we would put the people there at Ellis Island. I don't know how long they would stay there, a week or two, however long they need to make sure that whatever diseases they could be carrying manifested, so they were clear. We were told, don't meet in your churches for a couple of weeks. I never did that. I went to church every week. Even those first couple of weeks, I found a church. It was a Scottish Presbyterian church, shock of all shocks that the Scottish refused to obey the king, right? But we should resist at every point. But at that church where they were resisting and continued to meet, guess what they did? They said, well, we're worried the police are going to shut us down. So here's these literally hand crocheted masks that were peppered with the scent of peppermint oil. And I do not know what a hand crocheted mask is going to look like, but they asked me to wear it. And so I did. Right. And so, resist, but do it wisely, resist and do it cleverly, cunningly. I think Christians should be pushing the envelope all over the place. I think we should be evangelizing in places where people don't want us to evangelize. We should be at the Supreme Court about 1 million times a year because we refuse to be cowed and turned into cowards. And they want to use lawfare against us. They want to shut us up. They want to tell us that we're not being loving. They don't just tell us, they scream it at us at these events. And I say, well, isn't this event about love? Why you're not being very loving? Because that's what they say. Like, love is love, right? That's their talking point. Christians need to resist every possible point. And, we've gotten way past the question whether we should resist. We shouldn't be listening to any.
Did you freeze, Lucas?
It looks like he froze. Yeah.
Okay.
The rulers of the interwebs have shut him down.
We will not complete his sentence for him. We'll let him do that. But I'm happy with what Lucas is saying, and wisdom has to be there in the steps of resistance. But just go through the Bible. You've got the midwives resisting Pharaoh, right? Besides Peter and John resisting their local authority, you have Daniel resisting the command not to worship another god, pray to another god. You have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego not bowing down. This is a hard one for people. You got Jeroboam and the 10 tribes. Now, read that carefully. There was a prophet of God who came to Jeroboam, told him that he would be given these 10 tribes, and that if he would stay true to God, that he would be blessed. And people wrongly state, I've heard this at conferences, lectures, wrongly state, well, that secession didn't work. Well, it was not because he seceded and it was over taxes. It was because he set up false worship places and things like that he didn't receive the blessing of God. But if you read it carefully, he was going to be blessed by God if he would obey, and there's a number of ones that are in there of resistance at certain times. So
right. So this brings to my mind, I think it was maybe yesterday's stream, my History Done Right stream that I do, that I talked about, how seriously do we take our Christianity? And I mentioned how in Massachusetts colony, you have the leaders of the colony telling certain people they have to leave, and if they come back, they're going to face the death penalty. And the reason was these people were being disruptive of the church service in their community, right? And these were those people that would, ridiculously come into the service and yell and shout and disrupt the goings on and even take off their clothes. And it's like,
right.
And the colony leaders understood the importance of them protecting that space, that Christianity could be practiced without interruption, without disruption, and they took it that seriously. We just don't do it that way now, right? And I pointed out that, not only do we not have leaders that want to protect these spaces for the proper exercise of the Christian faith, we think that we're wiser and more compassionate by giving space for all kinds of activities to take place. And so we end up with, as Lucas was speaking about, we end up with these pride marches, and we've got naked people wandering our streets, and we think that somehow this is better for us.
Right.
And I know that for myself, I've often, having thought through that, I've often thought about, okay, so how seriously do I take my Christianity, right? Do I take it seriously enough that I want to see Christianity um, properly protected so that it can exercise itself in the public space and be what it's meant to be for the
Mhm.
community? And I think it's it's a bastardization of history when the modern teaching is, well, that's just so unloving that they would, speak that way to people. Well, no, what's unloving is that we allow our public spaces to be desecrated by
Right.
all of the stuff that goes on, and we pretend like that's somehow better and wiser and more, um, I don't know, more compassionate to everybody,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I,
And so
I have
many
a
things
question.
Go ahead.
A question. So, if a secular government says don't meet for church because there's a pandemic or whatever, um, we're supposed to follow that according to the secularists, right? But what if it's a Christian government and it says that you shouldn't have your business open on Sunday, right? Trying to honor the fourth commandment that we should keep the Sabbath day holy. Do you think the secularists are going to say, "Oh, we should just disobey that law because it goes against our convictions"? So, I think their answer is yes. They would want to have their opportunity to do whatever they want on Sunday afternoon, not have those kind of Christian laws like they still have in Germany and different countries. But why is it that in this country, when I say we would like to have Sunday laws to keep the Sabbath holy on Sunday, people are fully against that. But if you say let's shut the churches down, our whole society now will say, yeah, let's do that. Let's shut our churches down. I mean, I know Lutheran churches that were shut down for over a year. People from the Lutheran church came to our church because they were like, well, we don't have a church to go to because the Lutheran churches are literally shut down.
Mhm.
It blows my mind that we can have one overreach of government, but we can't have the Christian version of government anymore. We've really made a decision whether we're primarily secular in our outlook.
Right. And I think that's why understanding our Christian history, even what Tim has brought up, what we were trying to teach at our conference and at the family VBS is so important because, we're saying we should be speaking up as churches and believers, and that's true. But in our history, those that were in the civil realm also spoke biblically to things. And we have come to the point where, you know, I think the mayor suggesting that you park in all the places and use kind of a passive resistance approach is great. But how many city council members that are professing Christians voted against the pride permit? You know, there should have been the articulation of biblical thought in the civil realm as well, and we lack that. It's like we have given up the argument, and if someone says, "Well, I think this is best," we are afraid to say the scriptures say this is best, as if a person, an unregenerate person, reasoning from his fallen mind, is on any par with the mind of God. But we're afraid to articulate that.
Just a clarification. I don't actually think the city council voted on that Pride Festival. I could be wrong, but I think what happened was the Parks Department approved
They
the
left it in the
permit
parks. Wow.
like they would approve any other permit, right? And didn't make any distinctions between this permit and that permit because they don't take every permit to the city council. And the city council basically refused to claw it back. They would have to have basically nullified a permit that had already been issued.
Okay.
And so that was the debate. Can we even do this? I don't even think it came to a vote. I don't think they were brave enough to even vote on that.
So, I mean, the general principle is still there.
Sure.
And, you know, the police officers, they should have been instructed. I mean, those people you're talking about were set up outside the designated perimeter and were being asked to leave because the organizers complained, but they didn't have authority at that point in the park. But the police officers feared them, those pride organizers and event people, more than actual law. So some people got citations. You and I both know one that got a citation because he didn't move.
So, Lucas, you mentioned the secularists and their view. I find it interesting that for secularists, maybe I don't know if this is really true anymore with the way they lash out at historical figures, but someone that secularists have often loved to readily identify as a secularist in history, Thomas Jefferson, he was one who was very concerned about a God who judges nations in history, in time. And that's a very different kind of secularist than what we have today, because the secularists today they're more like what Jesus describes as those in the times of Noah. They're just eating and drinking and giving in marriage. They're not even thinking about the things of God, right? They're not even thinking about that there's one that they're accountable to and who actually might in that day carry out some kind of just judgment against them. But Thomas Jefferson, a favorite of the secularists, was very concerned about how God might judge. It sets up two very different cultures and mindsets and what is persuasive in the community then as compared to now. Okay, any other thoughts on render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's and to God the things that are God's?
I just encourage people to read the words for what they actually say. And ultimately under Scripture, God dictates what does belong to Caesar.
This is not a passage for blanket obedience to government. That's definitely not.
Of course, you do have to take into context, and that's what Jesus was doing. You might be a conquered people under an oppressive government, okay? And you're going to have to reason from this principle to that. But we're still, though we've articulated how secular we are still in a free government of which we have say in and various means to speak out.
You should live peaceably with the government. You should be a good citizen, and you should pay taxes in order to not end up in jail. But that's about it. That's, that's all. Those are some nice, good guidelines to go by. But, you could also put your life, liberty, and sacred honor on the line in order to fight for more freedom in your country and die for your faith, like our founding fathers did.
So, this verse, and I think you could say the same with Romans chapter 13. These aren't verses that justify any kind of government, right? These are verses that actually establish the proper jurisdiction and frankly, from Romans 13, the proper ministry that government is to have. So we need to stop taking these as just total justification of whatever the government says. We are bound to obey. Okay. Well, I think that is all we can cover this episode. I think that was really good discussion, and I would encourage any viewers of this video, if you have more questions about or that verse in particular, verse 17 there that we've been talking about, or want a better understanding of, well, what is it that Christians really believe about relationship to government and and such. I know that Pastors Lucas and Pastor David would love to have that conversation with you. So leave a comment, contact us, and that's a discussion that they would love to have with you and help you gain some clarity on that. And that could be the very conversation that strengthens the Christian faith that you do have, or it could be the conversation that would introduce you to this Jesus that we're exploring, this Christ that we're exploring here in the Gospel of Mark, and could be that moment where you come to an awareness of the salvation that is yours through Jesus Christ, through faith in Him. And so I would just encourage that if those kinds of questions are in your mind, don't hesitate. Don't stop yourself from contacting us with comments or directly through email to have that conversation.
Just be careful what you put in the comments, because the feds are listening. We saw that today.
All right. Right. So use proton.
They cut me. I was making a good point.
Anyway, we'd love to have that conversation with you. That's the point. Thanks for being a part. Hey, like, subscribe, and share the video with others. And let's keep building a community here that is encouraged by an examination of God's Word, reading God's Word and considering what it actually says, and using that as a means by which our faith is strengthened and we grow in an understanding of who Christ is. So we encourage you to join us next time, Lord willing, as we continue our exploration of a Sketchbook of Christ.